tell a child, you go to this church, which means you'll go to heaven, but your little playmates don't go to that church, and therefore will go to hell, seems to me to be an unpleasant thing to be saying. But
yes, that is.
Maybe I'm in a minority then.
That could be an unpleasant thing, but how do you...
Actually, an evil thing to be saying.
Let's call it evil, Christopher.
And something that only a religious person would dream of saying.
Let's call it evil. Where does evil come from?
Religion. Everyone has to understand that it is those who feel that the divine is prompting them, who feel they're permitted anything and everything. And it is those who are the leading, most salient, most violent, most vicious opponents of the values and civilization that Thomas Jefferson stood for and promulgated. I'm making the assumption that all of you check in every now and then with some kind of news outlet and have a view of what's going on in the rest of the world. Isn't it as plain as could be that those who commit the most callous, the most cruel, the most brutal, the most indiscriminate atrocities of all do so precisely because they believe they have divine permission? Shall I answer my own question? Shall I insult you? There is no explanation for the origins of our species, for the origins of our cosmos, for the origins of our globe itself. There is not one explanation left which requires the existence of a deus ex machina. In every case, we have a better or sufficient explanation. People who say, well, since we don't know, we may as well say it's God, are simply drumming their fingers. They're wasting their time and they're trying to waste yours. Ontologically, limbo exists for those who believe in it just as God does. I'm not here to deny that. It's only a few decades now since the rival church, the Church of Rome, the Church of England, announced that really no one actually goes to hell. It could be that after you die you're forbidden God's grace, but there's no real place of eternal, unending, infinite torture and torment with which those who claimed the grace of God and the redemption of Jesus made a living for so many years. And how do they make their living? By lying to children. Think of it. Hundreds and hundreds of years of people proudly earning their keep by lying to children and terrifying them, and saying that because they could do that, they were morally superior to us. Reason, common sense, decency, ordinary decency rebels against this kind of mind-forged manacle, however charmingly or humorously it's expressed. But hell exists in the minds of several people I've spoken to just today on this campus in the intervals of other conversations. For them it's real, and I don't say that it's not. But what I want to show is that it can, if it does exist, nonetheless be abolished, like many other mind-forged manacles and man-made tyrannies that confront us. And in fact, that this belief in a supreme and unalterable tyranny is the oldest enemy of our species, the oldest enemy of our intellectual freedom and our moral autonomy, and must be met, and must be challenged, and must be overthrown.
One of our guests tonight wants to know if your beef really isn't more with, say, the concept of original sin and universal depravity than it really is with religion in general, that you have a very specific view of what religion is, and that's what you have a problem with.
Well, yes, I mean, I think all religions are equally untrue, because I don't think there is a supernatural dimension to be appealed to, or to be used as an explainer of what we don't currently know about our species or about the cosmos. I think you get along much better if you exclude that assumption. And that means you don't empower, if you can exclude it, if you can limit it to a private belief, a belief people keep in their homes and so forth, which are, of course, more than entitled to do. It means you don't find that you're dealing with a class of witch doctors, mullahs, priests, rabbis, and others who make a living in politics by saying that they have special rights because they're doing God's will, which has been a curse to humanity throughout its entire existence. And currently, I think, in the form of theocracy and its various bullying threats, represents a very direct, immediate threat to the survival of our species. So yes, we'd be better off without it. The deist may propose a designer, and I may not be able to show you convincingly that there could be no such person. But the theist has all their work still ahead of them. From this designer, how do we get to the designer who answers prayers? Did you hear a thing? I mean, just a phrase, even an implication, even a suggestion from anything my opponent said, that you could, by an argument from design, prove answered prayers? Or prove that someone born of a virgin was therefore the son of a god? Or could prove that resurrections occur, and that by people being tortured to death thousands of years ago, we are now redeemed, that we are vicariously forgiven our own offenses by human sacrifice? How does deism help you to that? It doesn't. It quite simply doesn't and cannot. And the attempt to build from one to the other is a conjuring trick of a very vulgar, I think, kind. There is no totalitarian solution to these problems. There is no big brother in the sky. It is a horrible idea that there is somebody who owns us, who makes us, who supervises us, waking and sleeping, who knows our thoughts, who can convict us of thought crime, thought crime, just for what we think, who can judge us while we sleep for things that might occur to us in our dreams, who can create us sick, as apparently we are, and then order us on pain of eternal torture to be well again. To demand this, to wish this to be true, is to wish to live as an abject slave. It is a wonderful thing. It is a wonderful thing, in my submission, that we now have enough information, enough intelligence, and I hope enough intellectual and moral courage to say that this ghastly proposition is founded on a lie, and to celebrate that fact. And I invite you to join me in doing so. Thank you.
That's too easy. I mean, for example, where is it not written that I come not to bring a peace but a sword? Surely it is. Is it not written that those who won't follow me must depart and be cast into everlasting fire? Not a very gentle or pacific remark. Is it not said that if you don't give up your family, if you don't give up thrift, if you don't give up everyone who loves you and everything you love to sacrifice yourself for me, you're not worthy? These are strongly coercive and implicitly authoritarian or even totalitarian statements. And as C.S. Lewis rightly says, it's one of the very rare occasions where I agree with him, he said, you may not say that the preachments of Jesus of Nazareth are all right, even if you don't accept the religious basis of them. Lewis quite correctly says, if you don't accept that this man was the Son of God, you'll have to notice that many of his statements and sermons are either wicked or insane, or both. It's only on the belief that the world is very soon coming to an end, and that he himself has the right to claim a messianic role in this conclusion, that any of it can make any sort of sense at all. And everyone here knows at least some of the examples of what would be counted as wicked or insane if the messianic claims were found to be questionable, which they have been.
Say there's no intervention. We go to heat death. Does that mean that the universe was not created and not designed?
It doesn't entail that belief, no, but it makes it...
Okay, so what's your point?
It makes it seem a very capricious designer. Shall we say, rather as I said, it's an old verse of Phil Greville's, created sick, commanded to be well. Why would people be told, okay, I can create you, but I'm going to create you with original sin, misery, shame, death of children, disease, and so on, just to see if you can pass a test that would mean I might not send you to hell. I don't say that that didn't happen. I say that I'm very glad that the evidence for it is very scanty. And I accuse those who do believe it, and I can't have been surely misunderstood on this point, of harboring a very sinister desire to live in a totalitarian system.
How do you define sinister?
Mr. Hitchens.
The desire to be a slave.
Is that
masochism? I
regard
masochism.
In your brain,
I regard
or is there
masochism.
Something beyond you that?
I'll say that I think masochism is a sinister and creepy impulse. Yes.
Mr. Hitchens. Question for Dr. Church.
All right. I won't take a minute to ask. I don't just support and try and help out those who dissent from the ridiculous belief of Christianity and the horrible idea of vicarious redemption. In other words, the idea that by watching another person suffer, an innocent person suffer, that you could be freed not just from your debts or your sins, but your responsibilities. You could cast your sins on a scapegoat. I don't just oppose that disgusting belief, but I oppose the Judaism from which it's plagiarized and the Islam that plagiarizes from it. And I give publicity and exposure whenever I can to those who were brave enough in old times to oppose this nightmarish belief. And one of the great opponents of the Islamic totalitarianism in ancient Persia was the great Omar Khayyam, perhaps the greatest poet of old Persia, whose Rubaiyat, I'm sure, is known at least to some of you. And my favorite verse of this comes from the Robert Le Gallienne translation, and it takes the form of a question. The quatrain is in the form of a question. It says, "And do you think that unto such as you, a maggot-minded, starved, fanatic crew, God gave a secret and denied it me? Well, well, what matters it? Believe that too." To this magnificent astronomer and scientist and physician and humanist of Persia, who opposed the cruel, sadistic, verminous, ignorant mullahs of his day, I borrow the question, what is your authority for saying that you know something that I don't?
Will you promise to do it quickly?
So if your wife is pregnant and you know it's not you, the only alternative is that it's the Holy Spirit.
That's a false...
David Hume deals with this quite well. He says, in the case of the laws of nature being suspended, you have to ask yourself, have they been suspended in my favor, or am I possibly under a misapprehension? I think it's Thomas Paine who asks, which is more likely, that the laws of nature are suspended or that a Jewish girl should tell a fib? We have to grow up out of this stuff, you know. Now, your problem, Dr. Lennox, John, if I may say so,
Yes,
is not with me. Your problem is with Monsignor Ronald Knox, one of the greatest Christian apologists, first an Anglican, then an Anglo-Catholic, then finally a Roman Catholic, who in his book of apologetics very directly says Jesus of Nazareth never claimed to be God. It's not my problem. He claimed sometimes to be the Son, or let people run away with that idea. And to Jews, he was asked, when he was asked the direct question, are you the expected one, the awaited one, the one we want, the Messiah? He gave a slightly evasive, but they thought profane answer. Now, this is my account of this is correct, I'm sorry to say.
If we were only discussing ontological questions, that would be all very well, and it could be quite amusing. I could say that you require a higher degree of standard of proof for your proposition than I perhaps do for mine, and you'd probably accept that, and so forth, and we could go back and forth. But we'd be paltering again with the essence of the matter, which is this. The difference between the theist and the deist is as follows. The deist says, may not make sense without some kind of designer. The theist says, when I tell you what to do, Christopher, I have God on my side. The deist says, he can tell what God wants of me, what length I should shave off the end of my penis, if I'm a boy or have a male child, or off the clitoris if it's a female child. He knows through the exactitude what the proportions of that should be, what the diet should be, what the dietary laws ought to be, who I should sleep with, and in what position. And various other things. And since God doesn't ever directly appear and say, do it this way, it's done for him, and this is really convenient, by human representatives who claim to act in his name. So that's why I think your standard of proof should be a great deal higher, because if the reason this point is important to you is because it would mean real power in the only world that actually exists, which is the material world, of you over me, and you wonder why I'm not keen.
These prophecies are of a Jewish Messiah to come. And the Jewish religious authorities of the time considered, and who were the nearest, much closer to being eyewitnesses, if the story is true at all, much closer than the authors of any of the Gospels. They were the people who were the religious authority in the area. He was a member, if he existed, of their congregation. They thought he was a sorcerer and a fraud and an impostor, and convicted him of blasphemy, because though he in fact never said that he was God, there are some Christians I know who do say that Jesus is God. There are some who say he only claimed to be the son of. The critical question is, he's asked, art thou the Christ? Are you the Messiah? And he gives a slightly evasive answer at this point, but it's enough to make the Sanhedrin rend its garments. So all you're seeing in this tale, if it be true at all, if it have any truth to it, is the origin of Jewish-Christian fratricide. Of the Jews who have nurtured the idea of prophecy and the Messiah through their prophets for generations, who believe the Messiah has not yet even considered deigning showing up, and those who tell the Jews, why are you wasting your time? The good news has already happened. Why don't you just get with the program? I submit that neither of these propositions is worthy of the consideration of an intelligent or educated human being. It's Bronze Age peasant Palestinian superstition. And the competition over it and interpretations over it have made humanity's life even more miserable than it was going to be otherwise.
Okay. Well, I know that Dr. Lennox has a response to that.
And in the third form of plagiarism that it takes, which is the plagiarism of Islam from both Judaism and Christianity, the competition between monotheism has become really outright menacing. And the real responsibility of citizens is to hold it down, is to resist theocratic bullying and the superstitions that underlie it.
And in any case, it's not like saying that every living child of the Amalekites should be destroyed. And an injunction by God to Moses to say he's been too merciful, he's spared too many children and enslaved too few women, and didn't make the genocide complete. I'm sorry, I've never been accused of, and I expect not to be, if I'm lucky enough in my life, of any such thing. And the idea that there's a moral equivalence between the two, or handling the really difficult question of an unviable fetus and what should be done about it, isn't a moral equivalence at all.
So do you want to say that all unborn life is, like you say in the book, is a human being, and therefore you should not kill it? Is that what you want to say to get out of this dilemma, or what do you want to say?
No, but I think the presumption, I've long said that the presumption is that the unborn entity has a right on its side, and that every effort should be made to see if it can be preserved. And I think that's an ethical imperative. What I do say in the book is I think the Roman Catholic Church makes this argument immoral when it could be a moral one by saying that contraception is not to be allowed, by saying that contraception is the moral equivalent of abortion. In other words, to say that contraception is also murder, which is a nonsensical and disproportionate position. I quote some serious Catholics in my book. William F. Buckley, the late, is one. Claire Booth Luce is another, by saying, if the church says that contraception and abortion are morally the same, it degrades the opposition to abortion. And by making absurd arguments, as it has in the past, Aquinas believed that every single sperm contained a microembryo inside it, and thus that, if you like, I hope I don't offend anyone, hand jobs are genocide. As for blowjobs, don't start. That an ectopic pregnancy, in other words, a direct threat to the life of the mother, a fallopian tube pregnancy, is, instead of a direct threat to the life of the mother and an obvious no-starter for a human embryo, because that's going anyway, is someone who should be allowed to vote. This is nonsense. It's casuistry, it's immoral, it's superstition, and it prevents people from thinking seriously about matters that humanism can decide for itself, for heaven's sake, without any supernatural intervention. And to answer your next question, morality comes from humanism and is stolen by religion for its own purposes.
Humanism according to who? Hitler, Mussolini, Stalin, who?
You're saying that Hitler was a humanist?
Just Hitchens.
I've lived to hear it said.
Hitchens.
In Virginia. Hitler was a Catholic.
Hitler
was a Catholic, so was Mussolini.
Give me how does morality exist if it's just my opinion against your opinion and there's no standard beyond?
Both of them had an official political concordat with the Protestant and Catholic churches. Both of them wanted the worship of themselves as well as of God.
So I suppose no evil comes from atheism.
And their third main ally, Hirohito, the Emperor of Japan, not content just to be theocratic, was himself a god. So anyone who says that fascism and Nazism were secular is an ignoramus.
Why is it
on
wrong?
a gigantic scale.
All right.
I think actually Chesterton says somewhere that where animals are worshipped humans tend to be sacrificed. If you look at ancient cultures, and some not so ancient, that would tend to be true. I remember when, if it wasn't Singer, it was one of his disciples said that his own baby daughter was no more to him than would be, say, a rat or a flea or, well, let's leave it at that. I remember thinking, my first thought was, I'm glad I'm not his daughter, but but my second thought is, I'm glad I'm not his pet rat either.
Yeah, exactly.
Because it seems he doesn't have a great deal of sort of love to spare for anyone or anything. Look, animal rights can be overdone, and certainly have been, by especially people who object to medical experiments in a hysterical manner. But we have learned a great deal in the recent past about our kinship with and commonalities with other creatures. And we've discovered amazing things about the capacity, including the capacity for family life, solidarity, society building, and so on, among pigs, monkeys, dolphins, and others. And we know, because of the genome program, of our kinship with other much less advanced creatures, and that we are only ourselves half a chromosome away from being chimpanzees. The one thing this is impossible to square with is the idea of us being made in the image of God. That's clearly over.
It clearly isn't.
Anthropomorphically, animalistically, whichever way you slice it, we are primates. So in that case, in the image of what God are the others made? It gets you nowhere. It's a strictly meaningless statement.
And that's why Christ had to come, because we are fallen human beings.
And has to come again because he didn't get it right the first time. I agree with you that the grammar of the question is wrong, but for a different reason. I don't see what's moral about Christian preaching. For example, apart from the horrible idea of vicarious redemption, I'll say again, in case I missed you the first time, what I mean by that. I could pay your debt, even if I didn't know you. If I was a friend, I could say, you're in debt, I'll pay. In extreme cases, people have been known to say, I'll serve your sentence in prison. I could do that for you. What I cannot do is relieve you of your responsibility. I can't say, throw your sins on me, they'll melt away. Immoral. People are not allowed to be, you're not entitled to be relieved of their responsibilities. And the vicarious redemption by human sacrifice is a very primitive and horrible scapegoating idea that belongs to the barbaric period of human history.
So all pardons are immoral?
No, not all pardons. No, I didn't say that. I said vicarious redemption is an immoral doctrine. It's also immoral of the Nazarene to say, take no thought for the morrow, not to clothe, not to eat, not to invest, leave your family, leave your children, leave everything, give up the world, no investment, no thrift, no thought for the future, just follow me. That's only moral if you are a sure believer in the idea that the world is about to come to an end, which was the case with this apocalyptic.
I guess you never read the parable of the talents.
He said the prophecy is that the world is coming to an end real soon. There's no point in caring about anything else. That's not immoral preaching to me at all. There are many other ways in which I fail to see how any bad behavior can ever be described as un-Christian. And of course, it's completely laughable to say Christians build hospitals. Just many Christians have bombed hospitals as have built them, and as many Muslims have built hospitals as Christians have, and as many Babylonians have built great buildings as Christians have. If that's the best you can do, that's the best you can do.
The figures on American belief in things like virgin birth and the devil and their doubt of things like, are, in my opinion, wildly exaggerated and padded and produced by leading questions asked of the sort of people who happen to be in their kitchens all day and have nothing else to do. And what they tend to show mainly when you interrogate them is they don't even know what it is they don't believe in. I would instance Governor Michael Huckabee, for example, who says, of course he doesn't believe that he's descended from apes. Well, the theory of evolution is not that Governor Huckabee is descended from apes. He may know something about his family tree that I've also suspected in my time, but it wouldn't invalidate the general proposition. Usually the people who don't know about Darwinism are the ones who say they don't believe in it, which isn't a fair test of anything. I'll just add on this point of not being descended from, but having things in common with our primate cousins. We do, as Darwin says, bear the unmistakable stamp of our lowly origin. We do grow a coat of hair when we're in the womb and then shed it in the womb at about 3.5 months. We do have vestigial tales. We do have appendices that are for the breaking down of stuff on the savannah that we no longer need to eat, and we do have wisdom teeth and other dentition that we don't any longer require because we were adapted to an environment a savannah environment that we've long ago abandoned. So saying that you're 100% human is only another way of saying that you're very much 98% primate. Voila. Otherwise it's a distinction without a difference.
That's correct, and Christianity thought it could explain everything, and then it found
No,
there
not
were more
everything.
things. Wait, this is very simple, same as your point about molecules, that I said that these arguments predate Epicurus, Lucretius, and the atomic theory. Christianity used to say it can explain everything. All you need to know is there's an all-powerful, all-loving, all-intervening, all-knowing, omniscient God. Okay, well then wait, wouldn't DNA explain more? Well that only shows that God's even cleverer than we thought. So it's an infinitely expanding tautology. There are some Christians who accept, in fact it was actually a Catholic physicist at the University of Louvain in Belgium who first came up with the idea of what we now call the Big Bang. And most popes, not all, but most popes have accepted it. Some have thought of it as a challenge to Christianity. The Pope Leo, who he went to, I can't remember the scientist's name for a second, maybe someone here can help me. He went to the Pope and said, look, looks like this is how things started. And the Pope said, if you like, I'll make it a dogma that every Catholic has to believe it. He said, that would be slightly missing the point, Your Holiness.
Christopher, what does this have to do with the origin of DNA?
Well, because it is true to say that religion, as Stephen Jay Gould said, that religion and science belong to non-overlapping magisteria. I think these magisteria are in many ways incompatible and in many ways irreconcilable, but it is no more true to say that the existence of the complexity of DNA shows that God was more ingenious than we thought, than it is to say that it necessarily shows by its self-revealing ingenuity that we don't need the hypothesis of God. Both of these positions would be, in my opinion, somewhat reductionist, though I would have to say that I think the second one is more persuasive and more elegant.
Now, Gould is wrong.
Will that do?
Christians or religious people, religion is trying to find out how the universe began, and so is science. They're not.
No, religion says it does know, excuse me.
No, it's trying
Religion is
to
not
find
a process of scientific inquiry. Religion is an affirmation of faith. It
I
says
am
it
a
already
religious
knows.
person, Christopher,
It
and
says
I
it
am
already
using
knows.
evidence to try and point out that the universe exploded into being out of nothing.
And you have scientific evidence for the view that an intervention will occur to prevent the implosion and
No,
entropy
forget
of
that. Let's start at the beginning.
I can't forget it.
Let's start at the beginning. That's for debate
It's the
two.
only thing you've said all evening that I'm going to remember.
Gentlemen.
That's for debate two.
No. I mean, don't say, look, do yourself and your faith the honor of saying it's faith. Don't say it's science-based.
The argument
you
would
won't
be...
get away with it.
You'll feel so much better if you leave it behind you and go and study literature instead, and the consolations of philosophy and the beauties of science. I think these are things that are infinitely more awe-inspiring and wonderful and majestic than any invocations of the burning bush or the immoral doctrine of vicarious redemption, whereby a single human is made the scapegoat for all sins, and we absolve ourselves not just of sin but of our responsibility by throwing our sins on him. A disgusting idea, fortunately, never happened. The cultural question that remains, I think, is this: how are people going to live when they've given up the supernatural and the superstitious? Are we still going to need, I would say we are still going to need, the numinous and the transcendent? That's innate in us too, as is reason, as is morality. And so the great struggle is going to be how we find consolation and beauty and reflection when we have come to terms with the fact that we don't have a divine dictator to solve our problems for us, and that the heavens are empty, and that our prayers are not answered, and that we're alone with one another and have to make the best of it. I submit that that's going to be the great problem for civilization from now on. And a lot of energy, moral as well as aesthetic, is going to have to be put into solving it. But the beginning of wisdom is to realize you must emancipate yourself from the idea that you are the plaything of a supernatural boss. Fortunately, that's not true.
A sentence or two from David Hume would correct what you said. A miracle is defined not as a part of the natural order, but as a suspension of the natural
No,
order.
an intervention,
You can't
not a
say of the Big Bang, which is the foundation of the natural order, that it's a suspension of what it starts. You may not do that. However, if you meet someone in the street who you yesterday saw executed, you can say either that an extraordinary miracle has occurred or that you are under a very grave misapprehension. And David Hume's logic on this, I think, is quite irrefutable. He says, what is more likely, that the laws of nature have been suspended in your favor and in a way that you approve, or that you've made a mistake? And in each case you must, and especially if you didn't see it yourself and you're hearing it from someone who says that they did. I would go further and say the following. I'll grant you that it would be possible to track the pregnancy of the woman Mary, who's mentioned about 3 times in the Bible, and to show that there was no male intervention in her life at all. But yet she delivered herself of a healthy baby boy. I can say, I don't say that's impossible. Parthenogenesis is not completely unthinkable, but it does not prove that his paternity is divine. And it wouldn't prove that any of his moral teachings were thereby correct. Nor, if I was to see him executed one day and see him walking the streets the next, would that show that his father was God, or his mother was a virgin, or that his teachings were true, especially given the commonplace nature of resurrection at that time and place. After all, Lazarus was raised, never said a word about it. The daughter of Jairus was raised, didn't say a thing about what she'd been through. And the Gospels tell us that at the time of the crucifixion, all the graves in Jerusalem opened, and their occupants wandered around the streets to greet. So that it seems the resurrection was something of a banality at the time. Not all of those people clearly were divinely conceived. So I'll give you all the miracles, and you'll still be left exactly where you are now, holding an empty sack.
I'm a Navy brat myself. I'm from Portsmouth, and there's a famous story about a young officer undergoing a rigorous examination to pass for captain. And he's told to picture himself on a leeward shore with a very strong wind driving him towards the rocks. He's asked, what are you going to do? He says, well, cram on all sail and steer to starboard, hard down on the tiller and on the wheel. So, but the wind keeps coming. You're still being driven on. What are you going to do now? He said, cram on more sail and keep the wheel very hard down away from the leeward side. And they said, but you're still being driven onto those rocks, young man. What are you going to do now? Just cram on more sail and keep the rudder and the tiller hard down on the starboard side. And he's interrupted. He said, where are you getting all this extra sail from? And he says, the same place you're getting all your extra wind from. I want to warn you, as I close, ladies and gentlemen, against the dangers of tautology. If everything that cannot be explained, everything that is mysterious to us, numinous, say, or transcendent, must therefore be laid to the charge or the credit of a supernatural being, then nothing remains to be explained. Everything is, in potential, explicable. There's no problem to begin with. There's no point in this argument. Of course there's no mystery. There's no need for cogitation. There's no need for reflection. It must be part of a divine plan. I hope you can see the fallacy that protrudes from that conclusion too.
Is there anyone who would like to challenge me? Yes. Please.
If there is no God, why do you spend your whole life trying to convince people that there isn't? Why don't you just stay home?
Was the
Can you repeat that?
was the question?
The question is, if there is no God, why spend your life and career trying to refute that? Why not just leave it alone and stay home? Fair enough?
Well, it isn't my whole career, for one thing. It's become a major preoccupation of my life, though, in the last 8 or 9 years, especially since September 11th, 2001, to try and help generate an opposition to theocracy and its depredations internationally. That is now probably my main political preoccupation. To help people in Afghanistan, in Somalia, in Iraq, in Lebanon, in Israel, resist those who sincerely want to encompass the destruction of civilization and sincerely believe they have God on their side in wanting to do so. A thing, maybe I will take a few minutes just to say something that I find repulsive about especially monotheistic, messianic religion. With a large part of itself, it quite clearly wants us all to die. It wants this world to come to an end. You can tell the yearning for things to be over whenever you read any of its real texts or listen to any of its real, authentic spokesmen, not the sort of the pathetic apologists who sometimes masquerade for it. Those who talk, there was a famous spokesman for this in Virginia until recently, about the rapture. Say that those of us who have chosen rightly will be gathered to the arms of Jesus, leaving all of the rest of you behind. If we're in a car, it's your lookout. That car won't have a driver anymore. If we're a pilot, that's your lookout. That plane will crash. We will be with Jesus, and the rest of you can go straight to hell. The eschatological element that is inseparable from Christianity. If you don't believe that there is to be an apocalypse, there is going to be an end, a separation of the sheep and the goats, a condemnation, a final one, then you're not really a believer. And the contempt for the things of this world shows through all of them. It's well put in an old rhyme from an English exclusive brethren sect. It says that we are the pure and chosen few, and all the rest are damned. There's room enough in hell for you. We don't want heaven crammed. You can tell it when you see the extreme Muslims talk. They cannot wait. They cannot wait for death and destruction to overtake and overwhelm the world. They can't wait for what I would call, without ambiguity, a final solution. When you look at the Israeli settlers, paid for often by American tax dollars, deciding that if they can steal enough land from other people and get all the Jews into the promised land and all the non-Jews out of it, then finally the Jewish people will be worthy of the return of the Messiah. And there are Christians in this country who consider it their job to help this happen so that Armageddon can occur, so that the painful business of living as humans and studying civilization and trying to acquire learning and knowledge and health and medicine and to push back can all be scrapped, and the cult of death can take over. That, to me, is a hideous thing in eschatological terms, in end times terms, on its own, a hateful idea, a hateful practice, and a hateful theory, but very much to be opposed in our daily lives, where there are people who sincerely mean it, who want to ruin the good relations that could exist between different peoples, nations, races, countries, tribes, ethnicities, who openly say they love death more than we love life, and who are betting that with God on their side, they're right about that. So when I say, as the subtitle of my book, that I think religion poisons everything, I'm not just doing what publishers like and coming up with a provocative subtitle. I mean to say it infects us in our most basic integrity. It says we can't be moral without Big Brother, without a totalitarian permission. It means we can't be good to one another. It means we can't think without this. We must be afraid. We must also be forced to love someone who we fear. The essence of sadomasochism. The essence of abjection. The essence of the master-slave relationship. And that knows that death is coming and can't wait to bring it on. I say this is evil. And though I do some nights stay home, I enjoy more the nights when I go out and fight against this ultimate wickedness and ultimate stupidity. Thank you.